The topic for today's first panel discussion is effects of tariff on MSMEs. For that, I would like to invite Mr. R. Srinivasan, Co-Chairperson MSME Forum Bombay Chamber and Director AIRA Consulting Private Limited, and our panelists, Ms. Namrata Jage, Founder, BharatFi, Shri Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Bank of Baroda, and Shri Rishi Kant Tiwari, Joint Director, Regional Head, FIEO and Federation of Indian Export Organization. Sir will be joining us through virtually. He has already joined. Over to you, Shri, sir.
Good morning. This is actually a very hot topic. Every day morning you see the newspaper and there is something that is happening. In fact, this morning the CEA said that he has an intuition that this will all blow over. So I'm hoping. Yesterday President Donald Trump wished Prime Minister. So we are all hoping that something will happen. But we have to live with the facts. We can't live with all this. So we're going to discuss what's going to be the impact of this entire tariff on the MSMEs. So, Sabnavis sir, let me start with you. A lot of our members are already exporting. A lot of them are not exporting, looking to export. In layman terms, how does this impact MSMEs in particular and the economy overall?
Thanks a lot. So when we're looking at this entire tariff issue, I think we need to separate the macros from the micros.
Yeah.
So let me come to the micros first. Now we all know that USA is our major exporting partner. Around 20% of our exports go to the US, which means that in case we're talking of 50% tariff being imposed, let's go by it that 50% is the number. We are hopeful that it may come down, but let's assume as of today, as we speak, it's 50%. It would mean that the exporters could potentially be affected.
Okay.
When I say potentially affected, because if we look at the industries which are going to be affected, textiles, that's ready-made garments. You're talking of precious jewelry, precious stones and jewelry. We're talking of leather products. Now, these are the three major industries which are going to be impacted. And if you look at the composition as to who are the exporters out here, it tends to be the MSMEs.
Yeah.
The other two major export commodities are pharmaceuticals and electronics, which as of today seem to be exempted. But we never know in case it's a separate dispensation which comes, especially for drugs and pharma. So as of today, we're saying around 50 to 55% of our exports to the US could be potentially affected because the tariff which is being imposed on our exports of 50% is much higher than what is there for competition. Now, what do I mean by competition? If you're talking of India competing with countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Thailand, all of them have tariffs under 20%. So India and Brazil probably have the highest tariffs. So therefore, there is a major disadvantage which is there. Now, this said, I should also say that while they are going to get impacted, it may not happen immediately.
Okay.
So when I say immediately, this was supposed to be effective from August 27th. It may not happen in September, October, November. The reason is, number one, most of the products which we are exporting to the US are customized.
Okay.
So when I say customized, it is that specific kind of jewelry is going to the US, which cannot be replicated overnight by competition.
By competition, okay.
So therefore, there could be a time gap. There is some kind of breathing space. Like we can't take it for granted that we're not going to get impacted, but definitely it could happen, but not immediately. The second thing is that even in things like ready-made garments, we do face competition from these countries like Vietnam. The question is that can they scale up immediately? The answer is no. I remember when there was political tension in Bangladesh, there was this question which came up saying that, can India step in where Bangladesh is out? So at that point of time, we had actually spoken to some of the garment manufacturers in the south. And they said that, look, we're already working at 100% capacity utilization.
Okay.
So if I have to try and substitute Bangladesh goods, I'm not in a position to do it.
Okay.
I have to invest fresh capital. New machinery has to come through. So a similar kind of a situation could also be for the countries with which we are competing.
Okay.
So there is a breathing space, I would say, of maybe 2 to 3 months. But in case, like what the CEA said, that by November, hopefully there would be some negotiation. But by November, if suppose there is no negotiation, 50% stands, then I think the MSMEs who are involved in this business of these three industries would particularly be hard hit.
So there are there are two sides to this coin. One is there is going to be an impact, but the impact might not be immediate because others may not be able to catch up as fast as.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rishikantji, if you can hear us. We can't hear you. If you can. Can you hear us?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm able to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So coming to you, what sector specifically you represent export organizations? What sector specifically you see are majorly impacted because of this action?
Well, the majorly impacted sectors are gems and jewelry, as mentioned by the previous panelist. And the effect would be around 50% of our last year exports of gems and jewelry to US. Textile is another sector which is majorly impacted, and the effect is anticipated to the extent of around 40%. Then marine products are also majorly affected, and the effect would range somewhere in between 50 to 60%. And of course, labor-intensive sectors like leather are equally impacted.
So we talked about 90 billion last year to US. Overall exports of India were about 820 odd billion last year. What do you think will be the impact in real dollar terms? Any estimate?
Yeah, as far as this fiscal is concerned, since Indian exporters were well aware that tariffs are going to get imposed in the month of August, but they never anticipated that apart from reciprocal tariff, additional tariff would also be imposed. But in view of these facts, a lot of front loading have taken place. So fortunately, we have achieved around 50% of last year US exports. So this fiscal, there may not be much impact, but yes, if the tariff continues, if nothing happens by November end, however, as my previous panelist mentioned that the Chief Economic Advisor has already highlighted that by November end, the additional penal tariff of 25% may be removed. And there is also a possibility that the reciprocal tariff of 25% may come down anywhere in between 10 to 15%. So if that happens, the things may get restored in the next fiscal year. But for the current fiscal year, there would be a minimal impact.
Oh, that's quite encouraging. I mean, we thought that it's going to be a sort of free fall, but people who are on the trenches are saying it's not going to be so much. So that's sort of very, very assuring. Namrata, let me come to you. You work closely with MSMEs, right? And I'm sure some of your clients are impacted by this. Any specific stories that you have which says that, this is the kind of impact that has happened? So while we have a macro view that we talked about, but the ground reality, how is it?
Yeah, I would like to share about two of my clients. One is in engineering goods and other is in gems and jewelry. So now this year actually there will not be much major impact because these are a good 1 year or 6 month tenure contract, so that will continue. So the turnover will not be impacted much. For yes, they are stressed for the coming year. In fact, they have been, there are few of US clients which are eager to do the transactions with them, but due to the tariff, they are also figuring out ways and means in terms of exploring other markets, or rather, I would say one of the engineering clients, they are exploring if they can have a setup in Dubai. And the tariffs there are much lesser, and if they have a setup there, they can do transactions through Dubai. One of the second client I'm talking about is in gems and jewelry. So again, they are heavily impacted, but there are certain areas where it is design-led, like Sir rightly mentioned, and wherein certifications are in place and there are not major competitors, they are secured. But everyone is like, there is a status quo, everyone is exploring what best they can do, and people are also trying to have foot in the door in terms of exploring the other markets and not completely being dependent on US.
So generally there is a sense of flux, and maybe that is possibly the reason why people should be here talking to experts and understanding from them what it is, what's likely to happen. So you mentioned about, the impact on large three industries, and they're also MSME-led, and they're also employment-heavy. How much of it do you think will affect the employment? Because this morning one saw a report about Tirupur saying that we are going to lose something like 2,000 odd crores and whatever. So what is it that is likely to happen?
No, I think there are two kinds of impact which I could see happening. One is an immediate one on SMEs, where we're talking of employment being affected, because in case your turnover comes down and you're heavily dependent on exports, it's not very easy for you to substitute this turnover to another market. Absolutely. So I think for the last 10, 20 years, we've been talking about how we need to diversify our exports, find new markets. Unfortunately, that's not something which has worked out. So while there will definitely be more serious effort which has to be put in, maybe by the Chambers of Commerce, maybe by the Government of India, to ensure that alternative markets are explored, but that cannot happen in the short run,
Sure.
which means you're going to get affected. And the first thing which happens is that because most of these companies are working on very, very thin margins.
Yeah.
So if I see that I'm being squeezed because I have to export at a lower price to remain competitive, then automatically it is a case of me saying that I have to cut down on my costs.
Sure.
And what do? The first thing which you have to cut down is your labor costs. So I think this is a serious threat which is there because, as we have all been speaking since morning, that MSMEs do contribute a lot to employment. And today we're talking of a threat of employment coming down in these three segments. Maybe there could be a couple of other segments which I have not mentioned earlier. So I think that is the major fear which is there. And the second thing which is there is that since some of us, it's my own bank, we are all financing SMEs. The quality of assets of banks is something which could again take a hit.
Oh, yes.
So therefore, we are talking about certain kind of support which may have to be provided by the government and probably by the RBI to ensure that SMEs remain more viable. At least from the credit point of view, there are certain things which the government can do. I think we can talk about that later.
Absolutely.
But yes, there is assistance which is required to make sure that the SMEs remain creditworthy.
Yeah.
And of course, in terms of employment, I don't think anything can be done in the
short term.
In the short term, you cannot do anything. And that's why I think that while there can be discomfort saying that we may not be impacted seriously in the current financial year, but if 50% stays, for sure, you're going to get impacted at some point of time.
Yeah, 50%.
So you have to plan accordingly.
Yeah, 50% is almost like saying I ban you. It's not a tariff. It's sort of saying.
Because when you're talking of anything less than 50%, it's more of a hope right now.
Absolutely.
Because even till August 7th, we never thought there would be an additional 25%.
True.
We were thinking that 26% may come down to something comparable to those of other countries, less than 20%, but it went up to 50%. So as of now, we'll have to take things at face value and be prepared for the worst.
Yeah, be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best kind of stuff. Tiwari ji, we had, while this happened, we also had a UK FTA, we have a UAE FTA, there are other FTAs under discussion. Minister Goyal has been traveling all over the world trying to do it. He has been meeting Chambers of Commerce. How can we take benefit of all this and sort of mitigate some of the stress that is happening because of the US tariffs?
The government will have to expedite the trade talks with Oman, Qatar, European Union, Peru, Chile, New Zealand, and of course the strategic partnerships with Japan, China, and European Union will bring a major impact on the domestic manufacturing. But all these would require considerable time, would require a good amount of investment, would also require policy support. So these things may not be able to extend a positive impact on the current situation in the short time.
Okay.
These activities will require considerable time, investment, and policy support. And our priority should be to retain our US market because we all will agree that US is a major consumer, and as you rightly mentioned that last fiscal we had around $86.5 billion of total exports to US. So our priority should be to retain the US market because in case if we plan to diversify, we are not going to bring back the current buyers. And second, diversification is not realistic and economically viable as well. and any abrupt shift to any other market will not be economically feasible for Indian exports. So our effort should be to retain the current US buyers through several supports, as my previous panelist rightly mentioned, that there should be strong financial support to Indian MSMEs, maybe through a moratorium of 1 year for principal and interest or restoration of interest equalization scheme which could not get extended after 31st December 2024, or there may be some collateral free finance facilities for MSMEs.
Tiwari, I'll come to suggestions at a later stage. But what I hear you that you are saying is that it's not possible immediately to sort of shift gears to move to something. Sabnavis, you had a...
So actually, I wanted to say that, even when we are talking of having these FTAs with more countries, it has to be a very meaningful kind of a geography we're talking of.
Okay.
So I think if we're talking of, say, the European Union, I think that would be our second major exporting set of countries. So I think that's something which we have to expedite. I'm not too gung-ho about what we have signed with UK, because if you look at the numbers, they're not really substantial. And if we're talking even of, say, the Gulf countries, what are we actually exporting to them? The large part of that are refined products, refinery products.
Yeah.
So if we're getting crude oil from somewhere, we are making into refinery products and exporting it. So I think when we're talking of FTA, something which could actually move the needle, it'll have to be the European Union. That is where we need to focus.
Yeah, I think yesterday the European negotiator wasn't very happy with the kind of things that are happening. He was saying I expected the 13th round of discussion and things like that. So things are moving slowly, not as fast as industry wants, but possibly we need to move. How much of it is going to be, people have talked about the impact on the GDP growth. The first quarter surprises on the positive, 7.8%. People are saying, there are estimates, 0.3 to 0.6 in the overall. What is your estimate, sir, on what is going to be the impact on the overall basis?
See, actually, when we first had the tariff issue, which came up in April, and we looked at all the numbers, put in these things in our model, then we came to a conclusion that in case our exports to US fall by around 10 to 20%, our GDP could be impacted by around 0.2%. So therefore, we gave a forecast of saying that GDP growth this year could be between 6.4 and 6.6%. Let's move forward to August. We saw that this thing could go up to 50%. Then again, we revised our numbers, looked at what it could be happening, what could happen, what may not happen. And we came to a conclusion that probably it could be now between 6.2 to 6.4%. So 0.2% became 0.4% hit. But I think there's been a positive development which took place subsequently in the form of the rationalizations in GST 2.0, which actually has helped to actually prop up the GDP growth once again.
Sure.
And therefore, we go back to saying that India's GDP growth will grow by 6.5%. At least there could be an upside and not a downside.
Okay.
Even though we have a 50% tariff continuing. That's based on that assumption. Now, just to put it in perspective, the 7.8% GDP growth which we got in the first quarter has nothing to do with the tariffs, because the tariffs were not really being implemented.
True.
It may not even come in Q2. It may probably reflect a bit in Q3. But because of the inherent buoyancy we are seeing in certain non-export oriented sectors, and the fact that India is basically a domestic-oriented economy. I think that is a strength, a negative strength which we have gotten. Negative in the sense that we've always spoken of being part of global supply chains, trying to be pushing forward our exports, but we've never managed it. It's been more of articulation. So today it actually helps us as saying that since we're a domestic-oriented economy, an external shock of this extent will probably scar us, but it will definitely not have a deep, lasting impact. So GDP growth generally remains at 6%. That's why I think when I started off, I mentioned saying that macros are different from micros.
Absolutely.
Macro will probably remain unaffected. We may still get a very good number above 6.5%. But at a micro level, definitely they are concerned.
There is stress. Namrata, you talked about, people trying to use other geographies and things like that, but it may not be possible because the origin of goods is always an issue. How do people still manage that?
They should renegotiate the terms with the buyers. I think it's not necessary that only the MSMEs have to absorb the cost. If our product is our USP, I think we can renegotiate better. Also, right now, I think MSMEs should avoid expansion and focus on their cash flow should be intact so that it will not affect the coming 2 quarters. The first 2 quarters have been good, but again, there is an uncertainty as to what will happen. And as CEA also mentioned that efforts are being made, and maybe by November at least the penalty component of 25% will not be there. So I think MSMEs should be cautious with respect to their cash flows. That should be the primary thing.
Yeah, so as they say, hope is never a strategy. So this question, I expect both you and Tiwari to answer. Does this entire thing bring RCEP and Trans-Pacific back to the tables? Should we be negotiating that again? Is that an opportunity, or is that a missed bus? The train has traveled already.
No, I think there's definitely merit in saying that we need to go back to it, because I think with the kind of globalization which has taken place, and maybe we have missed the bus at certain points of time, I think it's nothing wrong in trying to get onto it again. So I think this is probably an opportunity, some kind of a bigger nudge which has been given to us for us to explore these opportunities which were lost earlier. So, because at the end of the day, I think when we're talking of making India great, similar to making America great, there is a case, there are certain limits which your domestic economy can actually push you. When we're really talking in terms of growing at 8 to 9%. I remember around 10, 15 years back, we were actually talking of India growing at 10%.
10%, absolutely.
And today we're not even talking of 8%, we're talking of trying to cross 7%. I think it's a large part of what the global economy has to offer us. True. And I think since technically and technologically we, I think, have become more savvier than what we were earlier,
True.
I think there is a lot of merit for us to re-explore these.
Re-engage in these trade groups. Tiwari, what is your take on, should we go back to the table on RCEP and other groups?
Yes, definitely this is a good time because there are a lot of positive aspects in our favor. The current retail inflation is close to 1%. We have a strong correlation results of USD 698 billion. And as you rightly mentioned, that domestic demand is almost stable because of these many reasons. So yes, this is a right.
But I think just one thing we have to keep in mind is that this actually came as an eye-opener to me also. Absolutely. When this tariff issue came up, that our tariffs tend to be a bit on the higher side. So I think there's definitely reason for us to relook at this entire strategy of ours. But this is something which has actually come over ages.
Yeah.
So I think with any negotiation we're doing with any particular country will necessarily mean that in order to get something, you have to give up something.
True.
So which will mean that we have to start rationalizing our tariff structure, because I think when you look at the average tariffs, when I looked across different countries, there was a document put forward by Fitch. It showed that we are still in the double-digit number, whereas everybody is in the single-digit number.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something, and it's always been an issue because we have always tried to protect domestic industry. So I think it's not so easy as us sitting in this seminar and saying that we should renegotiate. Yes, we can do it, but that always has repercussions when it comes to domestic industry.
Coming closer, we are in Mumbai, we are a Bombay Chamber of Commerce, we have an extremely good stake in Bombay and Maharashtra. What do you think will be the immediate impact on Maharashtra as a state? Any impact that you have been able to?
See, we haven't actually looked specifically in terms of what could be happening in Maharashtra state, because when we're when we're talking of things like gems and jewelry, some of those units are located in Maharashtra. If you're talking of textiles, they tend to be in the south. If you're talking of leather products, it tends to be in the north. If you're talking of automobile components, it would be once again back to Maharashtra, besides the north. So I think wherever
agriculture export.
Agriculture is actually in quantitative terms, if I'm not mistaken, is not really that significant. But yes, Maharashtra would again get involved. But I think there would definitely be a case of spread of this so-called negative impact across different states. And Maharashtra would definitely be facing it wherever you have a concentration of the affected industries. So it's something which would be of concern also to the state, because it goes back to this issue of employment also.
Yeah, I mean, that's something which one needs to sort of think about, saying that what is going to be the immediate impact. One is to look at macros and say what happens to India, but what happens to here and now Maharashtra is something which all of us need to sort of think about and see what we can do about. Tiwari, any quick numbers on what could be the impact on Maharashtra? From your members, whatever you are getting feedback as from your members?
So, two is the sectors which are majorly affected, that is textiles, jewelry, leather, and marine products. All comprise a significant portion of exports from Maharashtra to US. Yes, there will be an impact of around 50 to 60% as far as Maharashtra exports to US is concerned. But the good part is during the first week of July of this fiscal, Maharashtra has rolled out its own export policy, which has a lot of special incentives for MSME, like 5% interest benefit they are going to extend to MSME exporters from Maharashtra.
Okay.
They are going to reimburse airfare and stall charges to MSME exporters from Maharashtra. So we are talking about diversification. MSME needs a handhold support. They themselves can't go to a new market to replace their US exports to a new market on their own. They need a support from the government. So yes, the Maharashtra state government has this benefit in their policy that they will be reimbursing the airfare and stall charges. If any MSME exporter from Maharashtra would like to participate and export new market, they will get this benefit. There are other benefits related to logistics and export credit insurance scheme as well in their export policy, and the policy is already implemented. It was announced in November 2023. MSME exporter will get some support. In fact, we have constituted a task force committee as well, under the chairmanship of approval.
Oh, great. So those are some satisfying
I
statements.
just had some off-the-cuff thought which came to me saying that should insurance companies start looking at some product for companies which get affected on account of this idiosyncratic nature of policies externally?
Absolutely.
I think for our
We just-
insurance partners, I
Yeah,
think
we
we can
just
have a
had
question
an
for them.
insurance partner, so maybe that. So, coming to what could be the kind of suggestions your customers are saying. So Tiwari said some things are being done in the by the Maharashtra government, something will come from the state.
That is an excellent scheme. Actually, not all MSMEs are aware. Like 5% interest subvention for the exporters. There are GST waivers. Certain grants are available, and they have covered majority of the industry. They have covered engineering. They have covered agri. They have these are and this has been like recently 2 months back. This has been implemented. Now the policy has come in 2024, which has been recently implemented. I think definitely they should MSMEs should read that scheme and also speak with their bankers how to leverage that. Also, I think the ma'am rightly said, I think government, the bankers should look into giving grants to explore other markets in terms of, taking participation in exhibitions or for patents or certifications. This is very, very important to have an upper edge in the market right now.
Yeah, so those are some long-term things that we need to, they will not impact the Q1, Q2, Q3, and the survival of certain MSMEs. Sir, just, you had a point.
Actually, just in terms of suggestions, I
Yeah.
thought there are some things which you could think of. In fact, something which we have also been talking of is that the government should consider a PLI scheme only for MSMEs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, right now we've had a PLI scheme, an outlay of around 2 lakh crores covering around 15,
Yeah.
16 sectors. They have been specifically effective in things like solar, EVs, but not really for all the products. But I think this is, a part of those resources could also be diverted for creating a PLI for the SMEs, because I think this has been a long-standing demand. And you can fine-tune it to export, saying that if you're an MSME and if you're able to export a certain amount of your goods, there would be a kind of compensation of 4 to 5% cashback given to you by the government. So I think this is something which the government can definitely consider and should do it. This is probably an opportune
Thank
moment.
you so much, sir. And it actually validates our suggestion that we made to the Finance Ministry about a couple of weeks back. They had asked us for a paper, and it's possibly exactly the same. I mean, we could sit down and maybe articulate it better, put in the numbers and see what kind of PLI or an ELI. So because we came from the paradigm that possibly employment is going to be affected the most, and we need to protect the employment. And if you protect the employment, there will always be...
Yeah, exactly. When you're talking of
something of that kind.
see, there were conditions put saying your turnover needs to increase. I can always say that your exports have to increase. You have to employ a certain number of people, X number of percentage increase, then you will be entitled to a certain kind of benefit.
Absolutely.
Similarly, you can also give tax benefits.
Yeah.
You can give a tax holiday to the SMEs who have been dealing with exports. Of course, there will be this ideological issue of should it be spread to all exporters or only exporters to the US. You cannot probably exclude the other exporters. It will be difficult to do it. But I think on the fiscal side, there is quite a bit which can be done, and I'm quite hopeful that the government is also thinking faster than us out here,
Absolutely.
and they will probably have something in
No, I
mind
think
already.
the good thing is that the government has been engaging with a lot of people. Every day you see the newspaper.
No, in fact, if you look at the GST, the timing of it, one is, of course, it was very
Absolutely.
much on cards, but also announcing it at this particular point of time. One is to say that just before the festival demand begins, you lower the cost by lowering the GST. But it also helps the SMEs to actually benefit from the reversion of the inverted duty structure which was there.
Very true.
So when we are talking in terms of our exporters facing a problem in terms of pricing, I think the GST helps you actually to lower your overall cost of production.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
in fact, at another level, as an economist, I would say that even the rupee depreciation,
Will
we
be
were not too much worried about it.
Absolutely.
In fact, when the rupee crossed 88, we thought even 89 may not be bad. But we have gone back to 87, maybe
now.
around 88. Because the rupee depreciation, which is more competitive than what's happening to our other currencies, will also provide that export advantage for our exporters.
Absolutely. Tiwari, let me come back to you. You said US is very, very critical. Sabnavis have also talked about US being very, very critical to our. God forbid this doesn't happen and the 50 thing comes. Is it possible that we lose some kind of a long-term competitive advantage that we have? Because if you're out of the market for a couple of seasons, then it might affect long-term competitiveness. Is that a worry that you have?
Yes, as I said, that it is practically not realistic to lose buyers for a certain period of time and then restore them again. So the quality of the country should be to retain them. See, initially when the reciprocal tariff was imposed, the ratio which was in discussion was one-third, one-third, one-third. That is, one-third tariff burden was supposed to be taken care by Indian export, one-third by US buyer, and one-third by the final consumer. After imposition of these additional tariff of further 25%, the dynamics have changed. US buyers are claiming that only 20% burden is being taken care by Indian exporter, and the remaining 80%, that is 40% by US buyers and 40% by the final consumers, are being bought. So this has become a challenge. In order to counter this, some strong financial support should be extended by the government. And as I said, that there should be a collateral-free finance to Indian MSME, restoration of inter-circulation scheme will support to a certain extent, and mostly a moratorium on principal and interest for a period of 1 year will provide a response.
Yeah. Do you worry about SMA? Is that something that is happening, and should RBI intervene to say restructure the SMA, NPA classifications, interest rate subventions, and a lot of activity that can happen on the monetary side?
See, just like when we had COVID, we said it's a once in a lifetime kind of an occurrence.
Sure.
I think this whole issue of tariff also is a once in a lifetime. It could happen again.
Thank you so much.
No, it could happen again, but let's say, through my entire career, this is the first time we've come
Absolutely.
across such a bizarre thing. So I think there could be a response analogous to what happened during COVID time even now. So to see how we dealt with the NPS during COVID time, we also had this case of the ECLGS scheme.
Absolutely.
So you have a similar kind of a guarantee scheme. We had the TLTRO, which is a targeted long-term repo operations. The same kind of thing could also be replicated out here. I think this is what one would be expecting from the monetary side, from the RBI. And I think it's something which can be done. Interest rate subvention is another thing which has already been spoken of. I think this is something which could go in parallel with what the government is doing. But at the end of it, I think we should also look at it that is this probably an opportunity for the MSMEs to get their act together, to actually look more aggressively, get out of their confines and look at other markets, look at other ways of competing in the market. Because I think there's always this level of comfort which we get when we keep doing the same thing. 20% market share, US has been 20% of our exports. It's been increasing over time. Other geographies have actually been coming down. But is this going to be the nudge or the moment when India as a country as a whole would actually look more aggressively at other nations, as we spoke earlier about having more negotiations, getting back into those treaties to ensure that this entire canvas is actually widened? It could be an opportunity.
Yeah, just a negative, will it put MSMEs into a shell to say, the export markets are choppy waters, let me not try it. Indian market is huge, 140 billion people, so we have enough and more people. Let me sell it to India and not look at abroad. Is that a
No, that may
fear?
not work.
Is that a fear?
No,
Is that a fear?
I don't think that will work, because if you look at the domestic market and the export market, they're two different markets. And I think the effort which has been put in and the credit which the MSMEs have got for the country by doing those in the export markets should actually be stretching the frontiers out there rather than looking internally. Because the internal thing, I think there is more competition, different way, different dynamics which work out here. It cannot be a substitute for a lost.
So essentially what one is hearing is that, it's a time for us to sort of become more competitive, more aggressive, look at more markets, and possibly use this as one of the lifetime opportunity for us to see how we can enhance the entire export basket, both in terms of quality, quantity, and also look at new markets.
No, in fact, I would also say that the chambers of commerce, including BCCI, have
Absolutely.
a big role to play. Because today, if you look at most of the chambers of commerce, we have a lot of aggressive thing happening for the large industry.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for MSMEs, we need specific attention to be paid. Like when we have these delegations going out across the world, I think MSMEs have to be involved. They're not well organized on their own. Because how do I compare a panwala who's also an MSME
True.
with a dharvi person who's producing leather goods? So I think there is need for more organization. I think the chambers of commerce should probably have separate cells already there, but I think it should be more intensive so that you're able to do exactly what you do for the larger companies, for the SMEs.
Thank you so much. And, two-thirds of our members are MSMEs, and MSME Conclave is a star item in our agenda for the year. So I think we keep doing a lot of things, but it's quite reassuring. We must keep doing more for SMEs. We have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. If somebody in the audience has some questions, maybe we could answer them. Anybody has any questions?
More than a question, I have to own view. Because at least I feel as an economist, we speak from a different perch.
Yeah.
If you get real life examples. Like
One thing I would want to share, like ma'am said correctly, MSME needs, partners and not lenders. So I think banks and the institution like this should be the front runners to handhold whatever challenges that MSME would be facing to face all the uncertainties right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is once in a lifetime uncertainty, so we don't know. And like you said, maybe this is the only one. We don't know. We hope we don't have such shocks in future. But hopefully we should use this to become more competitive, become leaner, more productive, and use technology better, and therefore become world competitive as we go along. So if there are no questions, any questions that we have? Yes, Pramod Bhai has got a question, please.
With this new tariff regime, so what do we feel will the economy will be affected adversely, or will be able to tie up with the existing situation, sir? Are you optimistic about it, or sir, you feel that we are more dependent upon the foreign countries, sir? Thank you.
You're saying, are we being optimistic about this whole thing, or we're likely to tide over? Is that the question, Pramod Bhai?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I think Mr. Sabnavis talked about it. He's very optimistic. I think we'll tide over this at some stage. We don't know what stage. We'll wait for November. Like the CEA said, by November this is going to blow over. Hopefully, if it blows over, it's great. If it doesn't, then we'll have to find a method to live with this. I mean, it's a reality in life. And like we said, let's get back into shape rather than, hoping that something will change in the world. We don't have control over what the President of United States does every day.
No, actually, if you look at the way in which MSMEs have responded to 3 major shocks which we have had in India,
Yeah.
let me take you back to demonetization. MSMEs were affected, they have bounced back. GST was introduced, and they all said, look, what's going to happen to MSMEs? They've adjusted well. They've done very well, in fact. COVID was the 3rd time, and I think the main entity which was affected again was the MSMEs. So I think the resilience shown by MSMEs as a group, the way I look at it as an economist, has been fairly remarkable. Therefore, I'm optimistic that even we will tide over this particular problem.
Yeah, so the resilience is used and misused many times. So, like Bombay traffic, the resilience of a Mumbaiite is used and misused quite often. So hopefully, this morning.
We don't want more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and most importantly, Tirupur has been a great example. They have been Phoenix. They have fallen every time. They have gone back every time. So possibly MSMEs also. Tiwari ji, any last words from your side before we sort of?
Sir, as we all know that this is a temporary problem, and we all should figure out a temporary concrete solution to it. And the participant is theory whether we should be optimistic. Yes, we should be optimistic, because in the first 5 months, our nation's export exports have shown 6% growth, and our merchandise exports have also shown around 2.6% growth by scaling up around $179 billion of exports during April to August in last year to $184 billion of merchandise exports. And the total exports have reached around $349 billion in the first 5 months from last $359 billion. So exports have performed pretty well in spite of multiple challenges apart from imposition of tariff. So we are heading at fast pace to surpass the last year achievement of $820 billion. And this is a temporary problem, and hopefully it will get resolved by November end, as CA has also highlighted. So we should be optimistic, and we should be able to counter this current challenge.
Fantastic, fantastic. I mean, you can't end any conference like this with more hope than this. Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Sabnavis sir. Thank you, Namrata. Thank you, Tiwari ji, for this insight. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, everyone, for that insightful discussion. I request Mr. Rajan Raze, Chairperson, MSME Forum, Bombay Chamber, and CEO, Nikam Solutions, to please present mementos to our moderator and speakers as a token of appreciation. Ms. Namrata Jage, Founder, BharatFi. Shri Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Bank of Baroda. A round of applause for our panelists, because tariff is something which is currently going on and which is a really hot topic in India right now. And our own Mr. R. Srinivasan, Co-Chairperson, MSME Forum, Bombay Chamber, and Director, AIRA Consulting.